So welcome to October. We have a new theme. It's a new month. Our tipping point. And do you have to live these talk titles and these themes like I do? It just seems like, oh man, this whole week I was reaching my tipping point. And today's talk is critical mass. So, how do you get there? Where is that? Where do you reach critical mass, But in addition to it being a new month, our tipping point, a new talk, critical mass, there's something else going on today. I'm going to just talk about that for a minute. For those of you who don't know, today is, nationally, Pulpit Freedom Sunday. Oh, yeah. Pulpit Freedom Sunday. This is a movement that began in 2008. Gee, coincidentally, I wonder who was elected then. Anyway, it challenges the IRS law that states that in order for a nonprofit organization to remain a nonprofit organization, it may not specifically endorse a particular candidate. Okay? Now, nonprofits have always been allowed to speak to propositions. We have always been allowed to speak for or against human rights issues, wars, equal rights, social issues of the day. But the law specifically states that in order for a nonprofit to remain so, it may not endorse a specific candidate. It may not take out paid ads to promote a specific candidate. And it absolutely may not put on your Sunday service bulletin a ballot voting guide telling you who to vote for. Nonprofits are not allowed to do anything like that. So, this particular group, and it's a very, very small but vocal group, called Alliance Defending Freedom, has decided to make this Pulpit Freedom Sunday, and they have a whole group of ministers, and they are encouraging them to directly violate that IRS law and stand up and promote a particular candidate. And their idea is if they defy the law, then they can get their 501c3 taken away, then they can take it to court, and then they can become a Supreme Court case to have it overturned. Because it is their idea that if there is separation of church and state, then the state has no power to tell you what to say. I'm not even going to go there. Because the thing is, a lot of these ministers and a lot of these churches, this Alliance Defending Freedom group, I'm sure they're going to stand up on the platform today and they're going to tell their congregations exactly who to vote for, and I'm sure along with that there's going to be something about you're going to go to hell if you don't. Well, we're not going to do that, And what they're going to do is they're also going to send recordings of their talks to the IRS just to make sure they've gotten their point across. And like I said, the reasoning is, if there is separation of church and state, the state may not have any say about what is said in the church. The fact of the matter is, over 90% of the ministers in the country today believe they should not endorse candidates. So once again, it's only about the lunatic fringe. It's only about the people we talked about last week. Now, there is a reason why I brought this all up. The reason why I bring this all up is that any idea of a minister, any faith tradition, telling his or her congregation who to vote for is deplorable. It is unconscionable to me that anybody, any spiritual leader could abuse their position in the clergy for the express purpose of trying to manipulate their congregation. So therein lies the difference between faith traditions a lot of the times. Where other faith traditions may tell you what to do, how to think, how to dress, what to think, who to associate with, we are not that kind of center. Look, we are not sheep, people. Sheeple. We're not sheeple. I like that. We are not sheeple. If anything, we're cats. Did you ever try to herd cats? Oh my God, it just does not work. So here's the thing. Other churches may want you to fall in line. We want you to fall in love. Okay? There's a huge difference. We are not here to make you think one particular thing. We have not got a set of dogma. We are not here to make you fall in line. We are here for the express purpose of self-empowerment. And that would be in direct opposition to me telling you what to do. We are a place where people come to be empowered, to live the lives that they want to live, to be self-actualized, to be self-empowered, to make the decisions that are on your own heart. We are about empowering the individual to come to know the only truth that there is the truth that is in your heart, that is calling you to your highest and best good. That the only truth that there is the God within you that is found in your own heart, that whispers to you in that still small voice, that eternal, changeless truth that you find within yourself. That is what we teach here. We teach self-empowerment. So that voice in the darkness that calls to you and says, be still and know that I am God. That's your voice. That is the highest and best in you. That feeling that calls us and pulls us to a greater expression of our lives, regardless of what has come before us. That is the individual revelation of Spirit as us. And that is personal to each one of us. And it is in the desire of our hearts that we answer yes to that calling. That we answer yes to the self-empowerment, that we answer yes to living our own individual lives and make our own individual choices based on that truth, based on that power, based on that inner divinity that we are. The moment you stand up, and someone said this, and I don't know who said this, it's a quote, but I haven't been able to find the source. The moment you stand up and claim your divinity, Christ is reborn in your heart. Buddha rejoices. Muhammad dances on the mountaintop. Lao Tzu winks approvingly. And the promise of the tree of life is fulfilled in you. This is what we do here in a Center for Spiritual Living. This is what we do here at Vision. We raise each other up. We build trust. We trust in that inner voice and trust in each other. That is unique to each one of us. And in this way, we facilitate the empowerment of the individual. Each one of us here, an individual expression of God. And we co-create together, We co-create that fertile ground for growth and unfoldment of a life greater than the one that we've previously thought possible. We create shift. Shift happens. We create shift in our lives. In critical mass is the amount of energy necessary to create that shift. An amount, it says in the dictionary, an amount or a level needed for a specific result or a new action to occur. That's what we're looking for. So I know some of us heard about those experiments that were done years ago. I know in Washington, D.C., I think it was 1993. I think they had a group of people meditating in Washington, D.C. to lower the crime rate, and indeed the crime rate was lowered for an entire week, like 23%. And they took into account the temperature of the city, and they took into account the weather conditions, and they took into account employment and unemployment. They took all that into account, and there still was no reason for this dramatic drop in crime except that there were a group of people in Washington, D.C. praying and meditating specifically to lower the crime rate. They were doing transcendental meditation. And for that time period, for that week, they did lower the crime rate. They reached critical mass. That's what it's about. When enough energy is focused on a specific outcome, manifestation occurs. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, when 51% of the human race says and believes, evil will disappear, because the majority will be on the side of light. Until that time, every individual must of necessity be more or less bound by what we call human race consciousness. So reaching critical mass for Ernest Holmes was 51%. 51% of us, more than half. As long as we get more than half, we hit critical mass, and it just manifests in reality. We don't have to convince everybody, just more than half. Now, in Greg Braden's book, The Lost Mode of Prayer, he cited studies where small populations of people praying affected crime rates, hospitalizations, and conflicts in their town. And his figure was a lot smaller than 51%. In fact, in 1972, there were 24 cities with populations of about 10,000, and they experienced meaningful changes in their communities regarding crime and hospitalization and things like that, with a much smaller percentage of the population than 51%, which led Greg Braden to come up with an equation for critical mass, for a manifestation to occur. And his equation was the number is the square root of 1% of the population. The square root of 1% of the population. So let's look for a moment at the world. We got 7 billion of us, right, walking around on Earth. Now, 1% of that would be 70 million. The square root of 70 million is, you know what? It's like 8,300 and something, 8,366. 8,366 people. You think we can get 8,366 people together to pray? To pray peace? I do. I think it's doable. So that's his equation. Now, we know it works because it works on a small level. It works on those little towns levels. It worked in Washington, D.C. But how does it work on the individual level? How does it work in our life? How do we reach critical mass inside of ourselves regarding our own lives? When more of our thoughts are centered in love and in joy and abundance and power, if more of our thoughts are centered in truth and in love and in wholeness, we will experience heaven on earth. We will reach our own personal critical mass. Ernest Holmes said, daily, we must consciously reverse our position in the law, knowing that we are no longer subject to race suggestion of lack, limitation, want, or fear. Knowing that Spirit is with us and for us and operating through us, knowing that all good is ours, and specifically declaring that the particular good we desire is now made manifest. That is a bold and powerful and positive statement. You know, reaching critical mass within ourselves, that's our job. That's our job. In Centers for Spiritual Living, in this particular faith tradition, that is the commitment we make, to reach critical mass, whatever it is, whether it's 51% or whether it's square root of 1% of our thinking, or whatever that equation is. It's in our own minds to make that decision, but it's in our commitment that we reach critical mass within ourselves. We have to keep our minds positive, powerful. Can I say positive again? Positive, powerful, passionate, purposeful. I just love alliteration some days. We need to keep that focus. Keep that focus so that those become our predominant thoughts. Andre Lorda said this. She said, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. It becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. When I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. And isn't that the way it happens when we reach critical mass? When we reach critical mass, we don't care anymore. We don't care if we're afraid. We do it anyway. Absolutely. So what is our predominant thought? What's our predominant thought? What's the story in your head? What's the story that keeps going over and over and over again in our heads? What is that story we keep repeating and repeating and repeating? What's the story that keeps coming up when you don't think you're thinking of anything? What is that story? What is the story you keep telling your family? What is the story you keep telling your friends? What is the story that keeps repeating? Because that's the story that keeps outpicturing. That's the one that keeps outpicturing. The story we keep telling everybody. That's the one that keeps outpicturing in our lives. And Jordan Belfort said this. He said, the only thing standing between you and your goal is the bullshit story you keep telling yourself as to why you can't achieve it. I don't want to have any letters or emails coming. It was a quote. It wasn't my word. But that is the truth. The only thing standing between you and your goal is the story you're telling yourself, and you're telling everybody else around you about why you can't get there. We keep repeating the same story over and over again. Please do not be surprised when it keeps outpicturing. Don't look stunned when you keep getting the same thing. You keep thinking the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same thing. Think about this for a minute. Think about how many times, think about how many times you've told the same story over the course of your life. Think of how many times you've added to it, you've embellished it naturally, you know. Made it better and better. We do that. Okay, but think of how many times you told this story to old friends, to new friends, to family members. And now you come to a teaching like this, and this is a wonderful teaching. This is the place where we know that you can have a new thought. You can awaken, and you can change your thinking, and you can change your life. We know that. I know, and Mann and Morrissey always said, you know, we call this the new thought, but when was the last time you had one? You know, we come to a new thought like this, to a new thought center like this, and we start practicing changing our thinking, becoming aware of our thinking, awakening to our thinking, and then we start replacing those old thoughts that are no longer working for us with new thoughts, life-affirming thoughts, and we want the circumstances of our life to change like that. And sometimes it does. But most of the time it doesn't. You've had a whole lifetime of thinking an old thought, so you think a new thought once and twice, and you want to transform your entire life. That's not been my experience. You know, my experience is it's been a process, and if it happens that you just transform overnight just once like that, that's wonderful. Bless your heart. But I have found it's a process. I have found that I have to go back in over and over and over again, and I have to keep rooting up those old thoughts, and I have to keep examining them, and I have to keep stopping them in their tracks. As soon as I start going down that roadway and go, wait a minute, is that my thought, or is that my parents, or my government's, or my cousins, or whose thought is that that's running wild and loose in my mind? You know, who's living rent-free in my head? Because I am evicting them as of now. Whose thought is that? Because if that thought is not serving me, if it is not serving the me I am today, what do I want to replace it with? That's our job. That's what New Thought is about. It's about transforming our lives through a practical spirituality. Sometimes it doesn't happen all in one swoop. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, we cannot make affirmations for 15 minutes a day and spend the rest of our time doing the thing, and then spend the rest of our time denying the thing we have just affirmed and affirming the thing we should have denied, and obtain results we seek. We send out the word, and it sets the power in motion. Then we think the opposite thing, and we neutralize the word, and the result is zero. Have you ever had those times in your life? Or am I the only one? Am I the only one that sits and spins, you know, for days at a time where nothing, a whole lot of nothing happens? It's because we haven't made that commitment. You know, you cannot pray in the morning for something for 15 minutes. It's like, oh, I've done my work, and then go to the office and hang around the water cooler with everybody else and do the ain't it awful and expect any meaningful change. More new thoughts than old thoughts are necessary to reach critical mass. The same old story keeps us stuck in the same old story. And here's the challenging part, I think, for us sometimes. It is difficult to speak our word as if we don't see it. In this teaching, we are taught to pray affirmatively. We speak our word. We put our word into the power of the law, and it moves without question, and it begins to outpicture what we have claimed so powerfully, purposefully, passionately into the law. But we don't see it in the physical world when we're speaking that word. We're claiming it as so, we're claiming it as done, but maybe we don't see it, and maybe there's a part of us that feels stupid saying it when we don't see it. But it's like, but how can I claim that if it's, not here? Yeah, maybe it does feel stupid. Do it anyway. Do it anyway. Because here's what I do know. When we go through that process of affirmative prayer, when we are praying, when we're putting our word powerfully, purposefully, passionately into the law, what I know is that at some level it is manifest. At the level of the unseen, it is manifest. At the level of the mind of God, it is manifest. In mind, it is manifest. And what we're doing is we are joyfully, gleefully, excitedly awaiting its sure arrival here at the level of effect. It must manifest. It must manifest. Because we have done the work in mind. We have done the work in the law, which goes to work immediately, without question. The impersonal, the infallible aspect of the divine goes to work immediately, outpicturing what we have stated, because we are co-creating with Spirit. So we can rest assured. We can rest assured that it's happening. It's on its way. It's done. And that's how we can pray as if. So then what do you do? So then you go about your day. That's what the release part of the whole prayer is about. Release it. Okay, let the law take care of it. Let Spirit take care of it. It does it without question, without any sort of doubt. So we release, and we go about our way, and then what happens? Come on, tell me what happens. We all know what happens, right? Doubt starts to creep in, a little doubt starts to creep in, a little fear, a little I don't know. That's the time you go back to prayer. You start questioning whether or not it's happening. If you don't see anything happening and we start questioning, is this right? Is this happening? Is this real? Is this true? Is this... that's when we go back to prayer. That's when we go back to prayer, because those are the old thoughts. Those are the old thoughts that we're trying to pull up and replace with the new thoughts. So when our mind goes, the domino effect, right? When our mind starts doing that little domino thing, boy, one little question will set off a whole, you've seen that, right? A whole trail of dominoes that'll begin to fall over. And this thought leads to that thought, leads to this thought, leads to that thought, and all of a sudden it goes all the way down, and where are we? We're in hell. It's the only place those thoughts go. We're homeless living under a bridge. That's the only place those thoughts go. So what we do is we short-circuit that. We short-circuit those dominoes with that new thought. And we do it once, and we do it twice, and we do it as many times as we need to interrupt the cascade of the domino effect in our minds, so that the new thought becomes the predominant thought. When we interrupt that flow of automatic thoughts and we replace it with the new thought, we are short-circuiting that neural network. And that is not pretending. I'm not talking about pretending, and I'm not talking about wishful thinking, and I'm not talking about hoping and fantasizing. I am talking about a power that is greater than we are, that we can use. And I'm talking about a power that responds to us. Life doesn't happen to us. Life is responding to us all the time. And it is responding according to our predominant thoughts and beliefs. So we're not pretending. We are speaking our word into the law, and we're getting what we get. We're speaking a truth into a power and a presence that is greater than we are. We know it is manifest at some level, at the level of the invisible, and we know at some point it will show up at the heavier physical level, because there's only energy. Whether it's in form or out of form, it's only energy. All we're doing is shifting the energy from one form to another. That's all energy can do. It can change. Ernest Holmes said this. He said, when his consciousness is permeated with 51% of right thinking, he is healed. He's talking about us. When there is more light brought into this room than there is darkness, the darkness will disappear. It will go. Absolutely. It will cease to exist. That is our process. Daily, we must come to that inner power which is greater than the outer power. Daily, we must come to the inner spirit which is greater than the conditions on the outside. Do not seek to find God far off somewhere. You will never do it. Stop right where you are and realize that God is within you, operating everything. That spirit and life essence of everything. And wait right there for that power to manifest itself into conviction. And then you begin to create your word, which sets in motion the law, which produces the thing for you. And you will find that you will be surprised at the power of your word. It becomes the very activity and power of the infinite. That is each one of us. What is within us is the power of the infinite. Choose wisely. Choose wisely. Thank you very much.